If you're one of the wonderful dinosaurs who still read books, then you will know this problem, right? We reach for books because there's something we want to improve. There's something in our lives that we're doing that we're not getting the optimal results for. So we reach for a book and try to plug that gap. And of course, if you feel comfortable, you highlight, you write into the margins, and you're understanding the new concepts. All very exciting while you're reading a book. But once the book is shut, number one, it's really difficult to remember what we actually read, which is why I started using Obsidian and taking notes, all of this good stuff. That's not what we're going to talk about today, though, because there's a second problem that's even bigger. Just because you can remember what's inside the book doesn't mean you use it. And learning doesn't happen until we change our behavior, right? So if the behavior still stays the same, then there was no real learning going on. It was just intellectual fantasizing of a better world. Okay, so how are we going to combat this? I will share with you how I use books, turn them into skills so that I can use it inside my AI and let it make sure that I practice how to use my book. It is not enough just to extract the frameworks, the learnings from the book itself. That is like the preparatory step. It's not even the first step. Once we have the frameworks, we have to figure out how to apply it. So I'll show you how I set up my skill in order to be able to do that. First of all, let's talk about the abstraction problem and how useful ideas go to die. Lots of people say, well, it should be pretty easy to get AI to use a book's idea, right? You just, take the book, upload it as a PDF or something like that. Or better yet, if it's a famous book, then the AI already knows about the book. So you don't even need to give it anything. Or even if it doesn't know, just give it a summary of books. I mean, there's so many services that do that. So why don't you use that and then just tell it, hey, turn it into a skill and I can use it. Technically, yes, but let's talk about the abstraction problem and why the skill that you get at the end is not going to be useful. First of all, right, the idea came from a person who went through experience and they had the idea, the expertise, which they abstracted into book form, right? So this is already the first level of abstraction, okay? Now it's in a form that's easy to read, so that's a quite helpful version of abstraction. But if you use a summary, so now, from however many pages, 200 pages, and now it is a small one-pager with the key frameworks or ideas, then the problem is you compress it so much that you lose some of the nuance, some of the examples, right? We don't just learn from abstract concepts, we need to see how it plays out specifically. So already we lose that layer. All right. No problem. Then the next thing is, how about we abstract it further, right? Now let's, tell ChatGPT, Claude, whoever it is that you use, hey, for this book, help me extract what's important and then help me create a skill. So by the time you're creating your skill, you are taking an abstraction of an abstraction of an abstraction of an idea, right? We are going, like 4 levels of abstractions. So it's not surprising that at the end we get something very average, right? Something very vague, something that doesn't have nuance because we keep on stripping it of nuance so that it's easier for us to digest. And specifically for AI, we don't want to do this because AI is really good at digesting information. So we don't want to give it abstraction of abstraction. So instead, what we'll do is to make sure that we give the AI the right context so that it can understand 3 things. And let's talk about the 3 things. The 3 things we want a successful skill to do is, number 1, we want to know when to use the method. Okay, whether it is changing how we do something or whether it is changing how we think, we need to know when to use it, not just whenever, right? We want to be specific about why did you reach out to that book in the first place? What is that action that you want to change? What is that behavior you want to change? Make sure you know what that is and when that happens, right? Because the second thing is how to make the change. Right here, and I'm focusing on the change because remember, learning doesn't happen until we have some sort of behavior change. So it's not just, hey, let me read this book for fun. I mean, you can read it for fun, of course, but if the goal is to get a better result for whatever the behavior it is that you're trying to change, then you have to think about, okay, so how does that lead to the change? And that is dependent on the method that's in the book. Then the third thing is to record and review what happened. We need to know what happened at the end, right? Again, because our goal is on the behavior change, we have to know, okay, once I implemented the method, then did it actually contribute to a change? If it's changed, what has changed? Is it change for the better, change for the worse, something completely different? I need to rethink about what is this thing that I'm trying to work on? All of that is important to know. So what we're doing here is really to have a situation a new method from the book, and I mean book can be podcast, YouTube video, whatever it is, a new method which leads to a new action, right? Because we're making that change, and then see and review the result. And what you're doing here is creating a feedback loop. And if you remember from this video earlier on, I talked about the mental models that we want to use now that we have AI. It's because this loop helps us and helps the AI get smarter, right? Before, there's so much going on. Okay, we can't always create feedback loop, and humans are slow to respond, whatever it is. Feedback loops are a lot more difficult. But now that you have AI in your life, it is good at tracking things. It is good at remembering things. It is good at surfacing things for you. So you want to be able to more consciously create feedback loops so that you can learn, hey, what's worked? What hasn't worked? Should I pivot my strategy? Should I stay with the same strategy? Should I improve the strategy? What should I do? We only know if we have a feedback loop that gives us the evidence over time. Here, I want to introduce a concept that specifically feeds into the feedback loop and why we need a feedback loop when we're trying to change a behavior. It actually comes from Japanese martial arts and tea ceremony of how do you master a skill. But in that sense, it was how do you master the art of tea ceremony, or how do you master martial arts? And there is a 3-step process to it called shuhari. Now, shuhari, these are step 1, step 2, and step 3. So let's go one at a time. I talked about it in this video as well, but I will break it down here. Number 1, shu. For those of you who understand Japanese or even Chinese, shu means to, let's say, obey. Okay, meaning that whatever your teacher, your sensei, tells you, hey, this is how you do tea ceremony, for example, you just do it. You follow the framework, you follow their method, and you just learn how to do this thing. And I'll come back and talk about why this is really important. And most people try to skip this step. Number 2, once you know how things work, then you can go ha, and this means to break, which means, okay, not only is your sensei's framework interesting, now you can explore the edges of the framework, right? Maybe as you take another sensei's approach and see what are the things that overlap, what are the things that are slightly new. Can I push the boundaries of what I know? And you start to customize and kind of integrate this learning and start to break away from just whatever your first sensei said and try to see what else is available and match your reality. All right. Then step 3 is ri. So this is to move away. And what we're trying to do here is, okay, you've learned from your original sensei, you've learned other frameworks, and you start to see, okay, the boundaries, I can push them. If I push them in all of these ways, not only do things still work, things might even be better. And based on all of my experience, all of the expertise I've built up over time, I can actually come up with my own framework, right? So I can come up with my own style of doing something because of my philosophy, because of my strengths and weaknesses, because of my experience, all of these good things. And the problem is that we try to skip this step, shu, of just simply obeying. I was actually having a conversation with Christo, also an awesome YouTuber. If you don't know who he is, check him out. And he brought up, so what's the different thing that separates people who succeed and those who don't? Is those who succeed just follow advice and just do it. They do the thing that works, it doesn't mean that whatever, their mentor says or whoever the expert says is 100% correct. But what they do is, okay, this person has more expertise than me. They say, do step 1 to 5. I'm just going to do it. And then I can, based on my newly gained experience and the data and the evidence, decide what to do next, right? And I probably need to do it a few times before I actually have credible data, credible evidence to show, does this thing work? They're not trying to do all 3 things at once. I'll give you a classic example. There's a book called The One-Page Marketing Plan by Alan Dibb. Got to meet him the other day. It was really cool. I really like his book. But when I started my business, I started with this book as kind of like a Bible to marketing. But because I had no experience marketing, I made this mistake of mixing up all of these 3 levels. So in his book, it's very simple, right? There's these 9 things inside the one-page marketing plan that you have to fill out, and he tells you how to fill them out. And you just do it. But me, not having experience, I was like, okay, great, there are these 9 things. But then, secretly I'm not comfortable doing some of them. So I was making up excuses why I'm not going to do them now. And then I was saying, well, but then, companies like Apple, they don't do it in the way that he was describing. And so I was trying to copy some of the things that Apple was doing. And I was just such a mess, He has a great plan. I did not follow it. I tried to customize it. I tried to mix it up. And in the end, I was getting nowhere because in my mind, I was still unsure about what it is I need to do. And once you start to customize, you can customize all sorts of ways, right? Apple does it different to Nike, who does it different to Patagonia. You just get lost in all the possible choices that you can make. So I learned the hard way, just come back to this. Start here. Start with Shu, right? Pick a book that you like, the one-page marketing plan. You sit down and you do the work, even if you feel like, okay, I have a better way of doing this, forget it for 1 second and just follow the method. Follow the method, do it a few times to see with your own eyes on the results, right? We talked about it here. What actually happened before you start to change things, right? This is how scientific experiments work. You're not going to change all the variables at once and try to see if something works or not. You have to change it one at a time. So let's have a base. Let's do the thing that the expert suggested, the frameworks that are in the book, just as a base to get us started. And then once we have enough evidence inside our feedback loop, we can get to the break. We can get to the move away. With that in mind, let's now bring in AI. Because what AI is really good at doing is doing emotionless support. And that is crucial, right? Learning is actually a very emotional experience because we're getting into uncertainty, right? We're getting into the unknown. We are brushing up against our ego of, maybe we're not doing something right, or there's some fear around, what if I can never learn these skills? So it's actually a very emotional experience. But AI doesn't have emotion, and we should use it to its advantage, which means it can just guide us through the learning process without us relying on staying disciplined and staying rational all the time. Inside our skill, these are the things that we need. Okay, first of all, we need to articulate what is the situation where we're going to use this new method inside the book, inside the podcast, inside the YouTube video, whatever it is. And then we're going to take action, and then we're going to let the agent record our results so that we can have a feedback loop and analyze this over time and see any patterns. Now, let me switch my screen to Codex so we can build the skill together. All right, let's build the skill. I'll show you 2 ways of doing this. There are different ways, but these 2 ways are going to be dominant depending on whether you take notes. Okay, so first of all, the no note-taking version is just you tell your agent that you want to build a skill. And by the way, this works in Codex, works in Claude Code, works in all agents. Let's just take this as an example, okay? Based on the book, The One-Page Marketing Plan. And the situation when I want to use this skill is whenever I am doing any marketing activities inside my business, I want it to refer back to the 9-grid one-page marketing plan. This way I can make sure that I have the correct target audience, I'm tracking them, I'm nurturing them, I'm doing world-class delivery for them. The method, you can find this on the internet since it's a well-known book, and also help me track two things. Number one is, did I follow the method that Alan Dibb shared whenever I am creating my marketing documents? And number two is, what's the result? So let's start from there. All right, so what I did was just to tell my agent what it is I want. And by the way, as you see, this is not a complicated prompt. I'm just making it up on the spot. If you use agents as opposed to the chat version, like here instead of Codex, if you use ChatGPT needs better prompting, but if you use agents, prompt is less important. Context is everything with agents. So prompt is fine. Let's put it through and see what Codex says. All right, here is what Codex came up with. It built the skill, one-page marketing plan, and it will review marketing work against Alan's 9-grid journey. So let's take a look if it has the source of truth. Here are the phases that Codex has created for me, which is great. I'm just taking a look to see if they match what's inside the book, and they do. This is great. And it has a question each focused on the decision, which is really powerful. By the way, I will just mention this again. If you use only the chat version, so on Claude, it's like you use Claude instead of Claude Cowork or Claude Code. If you're on ChatGPT, you use ChatGPT instead of ChatGPT Work or ChatGPT or Codex. Then I highly recommend you just switching over to give this a try, because if you've done the same exercise inside the chat version, it's not going to be able to create documents like this where it's hyper focused and it understands your intent as well. So yes, just a small plug for try AI agents if you haven't already. It is not technical, especially if you're non-technical. Don't worry, it's not just for coding. I'm showing you everything inside agents, and I'm going off topic, but highly recommend that you try agents, because you can really see what AI is able to do. Because not only did it create the decisions that I need to make, but also the minimum evidence in the marketing record. Because what I did was I told it to make sure that it records what it is that I'm doing, right? So the agent understands, in order for it to do that, it needs to know what to check for. And so for each of the quadrants is created, okay, these are all of the things I need to check for in message, the core message, offer mechanism, proof, objection, CTA, and claims boundary. Okay, so if you haven't read the book, you just thought, okay, someone recommended, like Vicky recommended the books, I'm going to use it, I haven't read the book yet, this is where you can start. Just a simple prompt in order to get your agent to set up a skill that you can use and see if it works. For example, I will just give it a sales page of mine for a system thinking course, and let's just see what it does against this skill. Right, first, it'll treat this as a test. I didn't even say anything, I just gave it a URL. It understands what I'm doing, so let's see what it comes up with. All right, let's see what it found. Okay, so it took a look. It followed much of Alan's method, however, cell 6 is broken. Let's see. Checkout currently renders 0. Oh, this is actually, I've checked this before, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Not sure what happened. Maybe it's a browsing issue, but I can ask it to actually take a look. Not sure. Double check. Okay, while it's checking, let's take a look at the rest. So, okay, all of these 1 and 2 are clear. Partial for media. The source attribution and UTM persistence are unverified. Yes, actually, this is missing, so I need to set it up. Great. Lead capture, waitlist, and checkout capture exist in the plan. This page has no path for interested non-buyers. True, I haven't really thought about that. Okay, so I can update the sales page for that. Lead nurture, I've got the sequences ready. Sales conversion, okay, it's reading something weird and is actually rechecking, so hopefully it will be able to correct that. Customer experience, well, this is now coming to delivery, and my agent doesn't have access to the back end of when I fulfill the source. So I have my promises. It just needs to take a look at what's happening. Okay, so yes is correct. Okay, no problem. Then it'll be able to update this. Lifetime value. Okay, referral missing. True. I don't currently have anything for referral. So this is, as you can see, as a skill, it is so helpful, and particularly because I am asking for it to track the results it knew, to not just tell me, hey, do you have a target market? Do you have the message? But it's looking at what are the decisions I'm making and what it's checking against. Super specific. And that's the important thing. We don't want to abstract away what are the things that we're checking for, right? So this is good to know. All right. Great. Okay, so we'll tell it checkout is working fine, so update your analysis. So while it's doing that, we know that we have the situation, right? We have the method, we took the action, and now we are recording the results. I've just done a launch for that course, Complexity to Clarity, recently. So once I have the results, I'm going to come back here and I will tell it what happened, so it'll be able to track it. And because it pointed out specific things I need to fix, like adding the UTM parameters, adding, interested non-buyers, where do they go? Having all of these, then I will be able to go next time when I do a launch, start to have more evidence of, hey, these are all of the things I've improved. What happened the next time? Did it improve? All right, as a bonus, I will show you, if you take notes inside Obsidian or whatever your note-taking system is, you can make the skill even better by giving it better context. So let me show you what I mean. Context is key when building skills, right? As I was mentioning here, this kind of specific things that you're looking for already improves the likelihood that your skill will be much more useful. Now, the thing is, every single individual is unique, right? Let's say we all read this book. Maybe you have experience in branding. Maybe someone else has experience in accounting. Maybe someone else has experience in product, and I have experience in something else. And so even though the method is the same, where our knowledge gaps are and why we find this method helpful will be different. So bringing that context will highly customize the skill to help you do the things that you're not good at or the things that you want to improve on. So what I would do in that case is, once we have this result here, I will ask it, take a look at my Zettelkasten and find my notes related to Alan and the one-page marketing plan. Help me see where are my knowledge gaps based on my notes and what I would like to work on, so that this skill can be more specific, and walk me through how to make the marketing plan more effective. So what I've done here is I asked it to look at my note-taking system. It's called Zettelkasten. The folder is called Zettelkasten inside my Obsidian. So Codex is able to then go into my folder, look for what are the notes that I have related to this book, so that it can start to analyze for patterns, like what are the things that I keep on highlighting and noting, right? That can indicate a knowledge gap. So let's see what Codex finds, and we can go from there. And as you can see, it's already found some patterns that I'm focusing strongly on: focus, leverage, direct response, nurture, and the 9 boxes. And you'll see, there are so many different concepts in here, but to me, what I want to work on is focus, leverage, are 2 very important things that aren't necessarily visible here, right? So that's why we want to, if you have good, high quality notes on books, then you want to be able to bring that in. And in an easy way, right? Like, I'm not going through all the notes to say, hey, here are all the things that you should remember, agent skill, right? I'm getting the agent to do the work for me, because I've already done my part of the job, which is use my judgment, pick out what's important, document them, take notes, process the information. See how much more detail it can give you once it has access to high quality context. So it says, I've analyzed, here are your knowledge gaps. Right, again, getting more specific, which is good. The biggest overall gap is, of course, the bridge from learning to application, which is exactly why we have this skill. That's perfect. It says, okay, you haven't recorded these things. Actually, I have it in another folder, so I will share that with it as well. And then it says, okay, here's how the skill is going to be more effective. It is going to ask on 5 decisions. I love these. Okay, so what is the current constraint? It leads, sales, or delivery, and retention. Because in the book itself, it breaks up the 9 grids into 3 sections, which is leads, basically leads, sales, and delivery. So knowing what to focus on already, it just doesn't apply just the 9 grids by itself, but it knows to have focus. That is key. Okay, perfect. And which one grid cell is causing it. So see, now we're not just applying the skill, we're actually doing some diagnostics with it, right? And that is going to be really helpful because I'm not starting my business from scratch. So I have all of the 9 grids, pretty much set up, but which one is holding me back? I need to be more clear on that, which goes back to what I was saying about the 64-4, right? What 4% of the causes is going to give me the 64% of the impact? I need to find that, okay? What exact customer transition should happen, all right? Which audience, offer, channel, and CTA are we focusing on, right? Helping me focus because, in my notes, focus is a big area for me. What are we deliberately not solving yet? So see how this part is taking my notes on the book and understanding what am I prioritizing, and then is making it super concrete for me to apply those learnings. Awesome. Okay, and then it is also evaluating each grid cell for 3 levels, understanding decision and measurement evidence. And then it also found my business specific constraint, which is great. Blah, blah, blah. So now really the skill is being updated so that I am focusing on applying the concepts in the book. The agent is doing all of the grunt work, all of the retrieval, all of the design of using the knowledge so that I can apply it and build more experience, as opposed to I'm doing this thing again, let's throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. Right now I know every single time I'm working on, whether it's a course I'm launching or a cohort or whatever it is that I'm doing that's related to marketing, there is a process for me to follow that comes from this book and I can actually use it. And over time you'll start to see patterns of how you're actually able to apply the method. Is the method effective? Which part of the method maybe is particularly effective? Which areas you might have your own expertise that you can go through it so that you can go through Shu, Ha, Ri, and be able to apply the beautiful knowledge that's inside all of these wonderful books, or whatever the the format might be. If you're wondering what is AI agents, no worries. I've got a free resource down below to get you started, because again, last time I will say this, you gotta use, at least try AI agents to see the power of what it can do for you and not just stay on the chat version. So check that out below. I will see you in the next video. Bye.